So welcome to this session. I've tried to condense this preempt behaviour outburst session, just enough time for you to go off and get a cup of tea and a sandwich afterwards. And what we're going to look at is a couple of things around autism and the things that you can do that might make a big difference. And so sometimes they're quite small things, but if you don't know about them, then you can't add them to your toolkit of things to try. So let's go. Autism spectrum conditions. Now, one thing I must say about this is that within our DSM-5, so that's the diagnostic manual, version 5, which came out in 2013, number 2 on here, Asperger's syndrome, was actually removed as a significant diagnosis on its own. But if you're working with anybody over the age of 10, then you may find that the person that you're working with was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome because it was a different criteria. So when I always talk about it, because it very much depends on the young person as to whether Asperger's syndrome is present or not. So there's 4 here: autistic disorder, which is basically autism; Asperger's syndrome, which does not appear individually on the DSM-5; PDD-NOS, which is pervasive development disorder not otherwise specified, which is a bit of a mouthful. Now that is if a child doesn't fully meet the criteria for autism, but it has the child has some characteristics around autism, then such as poor social skills, etc., then it could be that would be the diagnosis given. And then there's PDA, pathological demand avoidance, which is not recognised by some local authorities as being on the autism spectrum, which there's more on that on a different day. But PDA has significant differences between strategies to manage behaviour outbursts because they're driven by different for different reasons. So although we talk about them as being kind of blended, if an individual has a diagnosis of PDA, then some of the normal strategies you'd use for autism doesn't work. They don't work. So it used to be that autism had a triad of impairments. And so this is from 1979. It was impairment of language, social interaction, and an inflexibility of thought. So we called it the triad for obvious reasons. But then that changed in 2013, and we now have reduced them to 2. So what happens is that some of the characteristics of autism are still present, but they've merged 2 sections together. So this is what we work with now. And one thing we know is that behavioural symptoms are very unique to the individual. So, you know, I always say if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It's like everything. And there seems to be spectrums within the spectrum. But what we do know is that there are some particular symptoms or characteristics which are common across many young people with a diagnosis of autism. So we can see here that typically there'd be difficulties with communication and interaction. And some of the reasons for behaviour outbursts is because a young person would seek or avoid those situations. And when I say seek or avoid, it's literally completely the opposite. So there'll be some young people that want to be around lots of others, but not interact in a communicating way. They just want to be there. So they might avoid speaking. And if they get asked to speak, it could be an outburst, or they want to avoid people. So if they're asked to interact, then there could be an outburst. So, you know, that there's the seek and avoid. And what we have to understand is that everyone has got a different seeking or avoiding need. So seeking is when I really like this, it makes me feel really good. And avoiding is when I really don't like this, I'm anxious, I'm upset, and I need to escape, literally. So what we need to recognise is what is causing the behaviour, whether it's someone seeking something or trying to avoid something. Some of the ways that autism might be displayed is joining in only if someone insists, and that could be that they're avoiding that behaviour. They're indifferent to things. They don't want to be involved, and so they would avoid it. They don't like variety in the normal sense of the word. So where we might, just for a change, we'll do this today. Well, that is not going to work well for your pupils. One-sided interaction means they might talk but aren't listening. So when you're speaking to a pupil and they're not hearing what you're saying, it's because they only are waiting to speak to you. And when you say, oh, I've explained that, are you listening to me? And then they get upset because they haven't. So that's another behaviour outburst you might see. We know that there are lots of young people who absolutely are convinced that they need to know everything about one particular subject, and that's all they can talk about. And if you ask them not to talk about that thing, then they might become upset. Okay, so now I'm going to mute because we've got some feedback. Bizarre behaviour, I mean, I've put that in there, and what I mean by that is it could be, you know, about stimming and unusual gait. You know, people might walk in a rhythmic way. It could be that that's something that feels good. It's a seeking behaviour. But bizarre behaviour to us would be something that's completely inappropriate in that environment. Okay, so we're looking at a variety of things here. Inappropriate laughing or giggling, that just is because somebody might have thought of something themselves and be having a little joke. And what happens then is it's a ripple effect. People then say, what are you laughing at? You know, that, you know, don't laugh when this is happening. And it's behaviour that could cause offence to others, which would then cause the young person who's done it to feel anxious and upset, and then therefore have another behaviour outburst. I mean, this is a very, very short list. There are lots of them, but there's definitely a strong need for sameness. That's a coping strategy. You might notice that young people you're working with who are on the spectrum would line things up, like everything in a neat order, and like a good rigid schedule. And if anything's changed, then that could be a behaviour outburst. It could be a new teacher, a new member of support staff, the alarm might go off, you know, a trial fire alarm day, you know, we got a mufti day. There's all kinds of things that could cause anxiety and therefore a behaviour outburst. If you find change really difficult, then young people will tell you in lots of ways which aren't very pretty to look at. But it could just be that you've asked them to leave it because it's break time. You need to finish that, whatever you're doing, at its break time. And that might be the cause of some upset as well. I've got some stories, you know, hundreds of them, about sensory differences and how that can be the cause of a behaviour outburst. We've got all those sensories here, but if you look at the last one, movement, and the proprioceptive, if they're sitting on a chair that wiggles or wobbles wrong, that could be something that causes an individual to not be happy with it. I mean, I've worked in classrooms where it used to be there was the loo was on the other side of the wall, and when the hand dryer used to go on, it was really loud, and it made people upset because it would suddenly go off when someone was in the loo, and people would want to leave. It was just the wrong sound for them. Also, it could be if your classroom is near to the kitchen or the food hall, there could be smells which would be very undesirable to a young person with autism, or to anybody actually. But what we have to remember is that for most of us, it wouldn't cause upset for us, so we wouldn't particularly worry about it. But the seeking or avoiding is very important to recognise with individuals with sensory differences. And it could be clutter. Most people, and I work a lot with young people with ADHD as well, and it's the same thing. It's an overwhelm. For someone with autism, it makes an individual feel like they can't cope in that environment, so they will want to leave it. It includes cluttered walls. I'm not just talking about things being left around. It could be lots of things on the walls which aren't lined up very well or have no order to it. So some of the things you can do really simply is to look at that and think, well, is it this that could be wrong? But I recommend completely that if you see challenging behaviour, then consider the sensory overload first. Have a look at what's going on there. And it could be that they need a strategy if they feel that way. And it depends very much on the age of your learner. But if people really need to leave for whatever time, it could be that they have a safe area that they can go to. And it could be that you have a recognition between you that you've got something that you can say or do, a signal that lets you know that the child or the pupil needs to go somewhere else. But I recommend saying, is there something here that's upsetting you and can you tell me? Because often that's all you need to do is to find out, rather than assume it's the behaviour is driven by something other than anxiety. Younger pupils can't tell you what it is that's upsetting them particularly, so it would be your job to maybe remove some of the sensory overload issues it could be. But remember, it might not be the environment, it could be a task they've been asked to do, or a place that they've been asked to sit, so that, you know, you can't rule everything out, but you need to think about that first. I recommend completely each time you walk into your room that you just do a quick audit, that nothing's changed, that there's nothing going on in the room that could cause someone to feel anxious about the room. And it really is a preemptive measure. I prefer preemptive measures than having to deal with a behaviour outburst afterwards. So go back into your class and do a room audit. Some things you might want to think about is the lighting and the temperature. I don't know what your learning environment's like, but if you ever go to a special school, particularly classrooms that have been created for people with autism, you'll notice that there's a distinct lack of almost everything. Blank walls, screens between desks, you know, dimmers on each area, covers on the windows, you know, no flapping blinds, just covers. You let the light in, but that's all. So those are the sorts of things you could look at in your own rooms to see whether you can make adjustments to that, to not to be distracting and not anxious. But also it could be you, it could be something about you, your perfume. I don't know if you wear perfume to work, not everybody does, but it could be if you're upset about something, you could transfer that easily to your pupils because they do form attachments with you. All pupils do. But colours might be wrong. I remember one time I borrowed a chair from, I used to teach IT, and I borrowed a chair from a room next door, and on the back of the chair it had the room number on it, which included a number 3, and this particular student was very against number 3. So refused to sit on the chair, wouldn't sit next to anyone that was sitting on the chair, didn't want to have the chair in view when they're in class, you know, and when you learn these things about people, you understand it's massive to them. So sometimes it's things you're not aware of and always ask. I always think that's a great strategy. But things that help, have a strategy, work one out. And it would be shallow or deep depending on the age of your pupil. But think about where your pupil might want to sit that's best for them and ask them that. You can think about relaxation strategies, deep breathing, that sometimes does work if you've actually got the chance to do that, or someone that your pupil can go with and learn those strategies. Sometimes when you've got an EHCP, there is a calming plan that you'll be given that. As far as I'm concerned, I would discuss it with parents or with, you know, the people who've produced the EHCP and Senko, whoever. Twiddlers and fiddlers are okay up to a point. I mean, I like that for ADHD, but not always for people with autism. I used to have a little box of labels that I cut out from inside my jumpers, you know, things like the size and the washing instructions. And if you rub them together, they're really silky. And for some young people, they would love the chance to just relax doing that, but it doesn't work for everyone. But that was something that I found quite useful. If all else fails and an anxiety plan hasn't been put together, or it is a surprise that there's been anxiety, you can easily use some grounding techniques with your youngster. I love these. They're quite simple to implement. Refocuses to the present moment rather than the anxiety or the fear of something. So refocus, name me 3 things in your bag or in the room, just get them to think about that. Focus in, 4 bright colours, tell me 4 bright colours, name of something. Have a little plan for that. That does help to calm. It brings the mind back into the present moment and out, away from the anxiety. So if there's no plan already, then use some of your own grounding techniques. But another thing to avoid anxiety, I mean, we know about language and taking things literally, and I know lots of people that aren't on the autistic spectrum who take things literally, so it works for most people. I like to think we should avoid funny little sayings, you know. If it isn't what it is, then don't say it. Don't try and get people to guess what you're trying to tell them. Just be honest and speak without any kind of sarcasm or joke. Just say what it should be. I avoid being too descriptive. I love this here, that the detective listened to her tales with a wooden face. Now, we know what that means, but creatively, that if you try to imagine someone with a wooden face, then your mind's gone somewhere else, rather than it being the story. So avoid all your metaphors and idioms where possible. Be absolutely straightforward in what you're saying. And I've just got a preemptive plan here that we put together for one of my students. And this was in line with discussions with him. He was coming to a 14 to 16 environment at college. Discussions with him, with his family and with the school about the things that would cause him to not be able to access our courses at school, at college. So we brought him in during August. He came in during August. He wanted to know exactly where everything is. He wanted to walk and talk around the college to see how many steps it was from here to here. You know, he was very verbal. He, you know, communicative. He was an extremely lovely young man. But these were the things that he knew would cause him to have a problem. So we facilitated this walk and talk around. We produced checklists for things that he'd need to bring when he came, because, you know, college environment slightly different, and he could have forgotten things which would have caused a problem. We showed him where a safe place could be. In fact, we gave him a choice of 2 or 3 places that he could go if he felt anxious about anything, and in kind of help himself to calm. And then we gave him a buddy in the college, and it was an older student who was very reliable, and when he joined in the September, we buddied them up, so there was a place for them to go and meet once a day where they could go and have a talk about things. So we preempted all of Jack's issues that we knew of before he came. So when you know you've got someone coming up to your year, your class, your school, whatever it might be, try and find a way to give them that opportunity to be in the place without all the others first. So I know that's a tall order, but you know, it worked for us, so I'm sure it would work for you. So going back to the PDA thing, I will just tell you, we have got a half day coming up on PDA very soon, 13th of May. If you want to know more about pathological demand avoidance and how it sits within autism, how it compares with autism, then let me know. You can either email me or go onto the website about that. It's coming up soon, actually, 13th of May. So half a day. So give us a yell if that's something you'd be interested in knowing more about. And thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions, because this is a lunch and learn, it's nice and bite-sized. If you've got any questions specific to your pupils, please email me. You've got my email because I've been emailing you. And please email me and I'll do my very best to answer and give you some suggestions. So that's it from me for now. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.